You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. This is a special edition. We are looking at the Auditor General's Report 2021. And somehow the universities, traditional universities, public universities featured. And we had to look at that very serious matter of accreditation of programs. Now, we will deal briefly with the matter of the judges and the cars that were auctioned to them that the Auditor General flagged as having been done unlawfully. And then we'll go into, call it the bigger picture. If you look at the moral question, there are some who say that's even an even bigger picture of the other expenses, the other ministries, and so on. This show is brought to you by the candid sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Ashesi University, that's where they have the ethical code. The students sit exams without invigilators. And Manasseh Azura Awina was speaking at the 30th anniversary of the University of Development Studies, UDS, as they also launched an ethical program this week. I was also privileged to be one of the speakers. And Manasseh asked the question, if we don't know how serious the problem of ethical conduct is in this country, we should check what is happening even at Bible colleges. The pastors, they write exams with invigilators because they cheat. It's also brought to you by Robert & Sons Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care service provider for 31 years. Fenat, Ghana. Think wood, think Fenat. Duraplast. How you get your water matters. Remember, where Duraplast goes, water flows. St. Thomas Eye Hospital, providing excellence in eye care. Hoptel, everything you. Mayway Insurance, dial *165#. And on the MTN to join Mayway Insurance, the dial is *165#. That's it, and you are able to join. So let's again go to start with Professor Kweku Asare. Professor Kweku Asare has been very unhappy about the report regarding the judiciary. And in that part of the Auditor General's report, the Auditor General says unrecovered loans granted to staff of the judicial service. And it discovers that 158,000, was giving us loans and has not been recovered. So what did the Auditor General do? Recommended that the Judicial Secretary should liaise with the Comptroller and Accountant General to have the loans deducted from the salaries of the staff. But this is the part that angered many Ghanaians, and the judges, through the Judges and Magistrates Association, has also been reacting. Auction of official vehicles without authority. That's in excess of 1 million Ghana cedis. Says that the examination that it did of the records of the transport unit for 2021 revealed that 19 official vehicles were auctioned by the service for 1 million, just a bit more, without approval from the Minister of Finance. Details are as follows, and we would show them on the screen. But the reason people are angry includes the fact that, for example, this is a Toyota Land Cruiser, and the registration is a 2017 registration. And it was sold for 57,000. Then there's a Toyota Land Cruiser which is 2017, again, registration, 67,000. There is a Toyota saloon car, Avalon. It's 2014, 27,000. You have a Toyota Corolla, 2013, 9,000. You have a Land Cruiser 2017 registered, 75,000. That's how it looks. There's a Corolla, also 2013 registered, that's 8,000. There's a Land Cruiser 2017, that's 67,000. The list goes on, and there are even, smaller figures for some of them. Toyota Fortuner, these SUVs going for 60,000, among others. The Auditor General's recommendation is that the auction should be nullified. The auction should be nullified and the vehicles recovered. Professor Kukwasare, you have been very angry about this. The judges say this is what has been available. It's not today. They simply made the application, the values were done, and then they got it. They had no say, sort of, in the process.
Well, Samson, let's not make it too much about this 1 million cedis, because we are talking about 17 billion cedis of irregularities.
Yes.
And as outrageous as this 1 million is, we're going to lose the big picture if that becomes our focus.
No, we have segmented this. We have segmented this. Let's deal with this quickly so that on the top of the hour, we'll go and deal with the bigger picture.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This is a symptom of a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is everybody is taking something away from the public purse. And so unless you think about it holistically, let's address that, the notion that everybody is doing it, so I should also do it. Now, I'm a beneficiary of the farmers' toil. I went to school, good schools, St. Augustine's, St. Peter's, University of Ghana, paid very little to get the quality education. And after getting that quality education, if I'm put in an office and then the state acquires a car that costs about $150,000, and then 1 or 2 years, 3 years after the car has been used by me, somehow, because I am the elite or because I am special, I decide that something that the state acquired for $150,000. Remember where the money is coming from. It's coming from the cocoa farms, it's coming from the miners, and so on. And then I say, because I'm special, I have bought this thing, which is valued at $100,000 for $5,000. And then I convince myself that somehow it is all lawful. And there's some loss of ethical leadership in this whole thing. So the ethics alone should prevent such things from happening. But in this case, it's worse, because as you read the Auditor General's report, the emphasis is on the unlawfulness. The Auditor General is not even talking about the valuation, as ridiculous as the valuation is. He's talking about the unlawfulness because the approval process for that boondoggle was not even followed. Somebody just got up and said, well, here, go, take it. it's 100,000, you pay 5,000, drive it home. And then you look at that audit report, and then what is the Auditor General recommending? Something, the auction should be nullified. Well, the car is gone maybe 2 years ago. Nullifying it, what does it entail? The proper thing to do is to say, look, there is a loss to the state because you've taken something that cost 100,000, that has a value of 100,000 to the state, and you've sold it for 5,000. You've taken $95,000 from the state. If the secretary or the file clerk took $500 or 500 cedis in interest and went to this judge, and the judge will put him in jail for 20 years. But because the judge is able to clothe this thing in auction of state vehicles, an auction that is available to only him, he's able to buy something that costs the state 100,000 or has a value of 100,000 for 5,000. If indeed it is legitimate, why don't you open this auction to every Ghanaian so that the poor farmer can also buy this TLC, Toyota Land Cruiser, for $5,000? Why is it only limited to some special Ghanaians to transfer that amount of money to them? To me, it's a huge, huge, huge problem. And it's almost unfair to just limit our focus on that.
Yes,
because we have 17 billion cedis.
Yes, but Prof, the question that comes up is that this is not new. This is the norm. And the auction is not made a public auction because you use the car and then you are made to buy it by yourself. And it is in the public service. It's not only limited to judges.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that.
Yeah.
It's the norm, it is done. But what I'm telling you is something that is unethical and is wrong merely because these people have power, merely because they have captured power, they are transferring wealth to themselves. I remember in 2006 or something like that, I can't remember now, the years have gone by, I went to Shraj on a similar issue, MP cars. They will give, at that time, I think they were giving them loans of $30,000 or whatever it was. And I petitioned Shraj and I said, look, this is just a disguised transfer of funds to the MPs. And you can Google that. Shraj agreed with me. So many years after, the 30,000 has grown to 100,000. It's the same scheme. And what I'm suggesting is, as long as we continue to think these things are legal and can be done, then we must understand that we would always be going to the IMF. Because what we are doing is, I call it post-revenue collection losses. After we've collected the revenue, we figure out ways to share it to ourselves. Some very few people using different tricks. One of them is you can buy your car that you use for 2 years, which has a value of $100,000 for $5,000. Another is you can give a loan to somebody and then you don't collect it. And so on and so forth. So there are all these schemes in the report, and the Auditor General should do more than just document and memorialize this. He should disallow and surcharge. Moreover, if you look at this particular transaction, it was unlawful. Read the Public Financial Management Act. It says that if you don't follow the Public Financial Management Act, it is an offense. How many of these people are actually going to be put on trial because of this offense? They have a nice paragraph in there. It's an offense, and then you would pay 20,000 penalty units for 6 months in prison, and so on. It's all elegantly crafted, but never enforced. because the system has been reduced to take yours and I close my eyes. When I take mine, you close your eyes. That's what is going on. And this, anybody who thinks this is okay because it's being done system-wide is not understanding the problem. The problem is because this is being done system-wide, that is why we are suffering. That's why we are going to IMF. That's why all our problems. That's why the hospitals don't have drugs. That's why the roads are bad. And the only way we are going to stop it is to stop agreeing that it makes sense. It doesn't make sense to sell public assets at that reduced prices. That's the bottom line here.
Thank you. Let's hear you briefly on this so that we will now move on to the bigger picture of the 17 billion that Professor Kweku wants us to move in quickly. Yes, Dr. Santi.
Yeah. I just, and because we're going to go into that bigger point, I'll come back and read section 96 of the Public Financial Management Act. But two things. If you just track the anatomy of what has happened, right? The person who has to make the decision that these cars basically have reached the point where they should be auctioned. That's where the first problem you have there. And then the valuation. Now, I know ST because even
educate our audience.
Yes.
You just said something. You didn't say who is it, who makes the decision.
Yes. So it
has to be auctioned.
In the private sector, your HR or somebody will be the one that is responsible, or your financial accountant or whoever. But they have to make a determination that this assets, where they are or within the rules. And the person, of course, has to follow the rules. So in this case, you need some fiat from the Ministry of Finance to dispose of that asset. So if that person doesn't follow, the public financial management law is very, very clear. There are penalties that the person. So this is like the perfect example of why surcharge powers are there. And actually, the surcharge powers is not only for the Auditor General, but also the Minister of Finance also has surcharge powers. So when you don't, these systems have been designed for a reason. And any time that we treat them as suggestions, as Professor Sari keeps saying, then we undermine the entire system that we have put in place. And in this case, for me, STC valuation, even for private people who go to STC, when you see the valuation, you are asking yourself, on what is their benchmarking? Because every STC valuation I've seen is the lower if you compare it to what else is out there in the market. It's so far apart. But once you bring an STC valuation, say, well, it has been determined, STC is the one that is the preferred whatever, and therefore we have gone according to the rules. So why are you making... so somebody even has to be asking, how does STC set its valuation for these assets of the state, which is so different from what is on the market?
So they would have evaluated, examined the car, and people are angry about the 2018 cars, yes. 2019.
For Land Cruiser.
Toyota Fortuner vehicles. For example, there's one Toyota Fortuner, I will not bring the registration number, just is that it's registered 2018, and it was sold for 87,000. Then within the same time too, you have another one, a Toyota Land Cruiser, 2019, and it's sold for 123,000. So that's an appreciation. There's also a Toyota Fortuner, 2018, but it's sold for 107,000. So you can see that there's some trend to show you that it's not the case that all of the cars are just being sort of giving away.
And I mean, I said anybody, you can Google Tonaton or whatever, and any of these cars. And they are, of course, you need to see the assessment of the condition of the car and all of those things. But if these are cars that are used by judges, I have to say, I don't think it would have even the mileage that most cars would carry. But I think the point is that there's a problem with the valuation. Whether it is the customs one, the allocation cards that are given by customs, or anywhere you see an ST valuation, it's so far apart from anything that anybody knows. And nobody has questioned why we should be getting such valuation from STC. And I think that is part of the problem. If at least, let's say the law states, at least the valuation must be consistent with what is in the market. Or even there's going to be a discount, the basis of that discount has to be made clear. Is it 10% or 5% or whatever? Okay. You know, at the moment it is, as Professor Sari says, it's basically just
the other question some have been asking has to do with some of these judges are still sitting as judges. So what was the need for the vehicles to be auctioned to them? There are a couple of them who are retiring. So they are retiring, so they go with their vehicles, so to speak. So some felt that could be, if you like, call it some ex gratia for them. But those who are still there, perhaps the person is in the Court of Appeal and went to the Court of Appeal a year or two ago, got the vehicle, and then in 2 years' time, they are moving to Supreme Court. So it gets auctioned to them, they go to Supreme Court, they get a new one.
Like
is that what is going on?
It's like the MPs who may have been there for 6 terms, who get their ex gratia and their car allowance, and they buy one Land Cruiser and one saloon, and they come back to Parliament, get another car allowance for one. And we're talking about 4 years. If you buy a Land Cruiser normally has a longer shelf life. You know, by the time you do 5 terms and you are buying at that's why there are cases where people need to sell them off and you almost become a car salesperson within that. But there's obviously, I think, as for perks of office and all of that, yes, we can settle on what is practicable, what the state can afford. It is really the rules and the rationale behind the rules and the discretion when you are exercising the rules, as you were saying. What informs you for you to dispose of an asset that may be 3 years or 4 years old? What is the basis on which that itself, as the public financial, your rationale, all of that has to be documented and properly regulated. Otherwise, I can come today and say, 1 year old car, I think we have decided, as we have decided to auction it, and that's the only basis on which we proceed. So that has to be addressed, and it's a systemic problem.
Prof's view, as many, if you have followed social media and even in the traditional mainline media, is that this must stop. Yes. We should just stop this process. But not only to judges, like the whole public service, it should stop. Is that what you say?
Yes, but the point is, we have to look at, sometimes I don't even know where the law, but you go, whether it's civil service or the Public Services Commission or even the particular entity itself might have rules, related to this. So you almost need to have a complete overview of the entire system to make sure that nobody can find loopholes, because sometimes you even pass the law and then somebody will pull a legislation and say, no, in our context, the law still allows us to do this. So it's a massive job, but it is something that we have to deal with, because at the moment, there's all this discretion within the system, poorly regulated, and just people making choices. And of course, most of the time, it is for their private interest. It's not, news to the public.
I'm made to, let's hear you.
Yes,
I'm made to understand that saloon cars are depreciated by 25% annually. And after 4 years, it has no book value. But the 4x4, they differ. I hear it's 6 years or 8 years. So how do we go about it? And some of the professionals who are talking to us are still saying, this is ridiculous, this is ridiculous. Customs does the valuation of vehicles for us. Yeah. Why don't we go to customs, but we go to STC, and somebody says, go to STC for these ridiculously low prices?
Samson, you see, accounting policies differs from institution to institution. So I don't want to comment on the depreciation rates. But what we should understand is that in the case of the judiciary, as part of their conditions of service, duty post vehicles are sold to staff of the judicial service within a certain period of usage, whether you are in active service or you are leaving the office. What we should also know is that in the public service, a lot of people do not know that even before you can do an auction of vehicle or sell it as a duty post vehicle to serving officers, you need the approval of the chief of staff. The ministerial approval under Regulation 158 of the Public Financial Management Regulation is a concurrent or a subsequent approval. In the specific case of the judges, I am informed that even the Judicial Council, there's a council of the Judicial Service, gave approval to that. It is not a mainstream auction as we used to know. Regulation 158, which was cited by the Auditor General, made reference to the principal spending officer not securing the required approval from the Minister for Finance. And the principal spending officer here is the Chief Administrator of the Judicial Service, who is the Judicial Secretary.
Okay.
So in my case, in my view, I think that is the more reason why the Auditor General is clear and categorical that in the absence of this approval, we should nullify the entire process. The Auditor General knows very well that this approval can easily be secured. So then, the Judicial Secretary would have to secure this approval. My other concern is that he did not fault the process. And everybody is saying that the values are ridiculous. In the scheme of things, as far as public service is concerned, the valuation, government valuer is STC under the circumstance. Right. So if we want to see competitive valuation processes, then we have to review our laws. I do not think that the judges mentioned here have committed any crime at all. It's part of their conditions of service. If anything at all, the blame must be laid squarely at the footsteps of the principal spending officer who failed to secure the ministerial approval. That is what I think we should be doing. As for the values, once the Auditor General did not question this, I don't have any basis to question it. But I think that those who have problems with the valuation, then they should also encourage a review of the public service regulations so that we can have other competitive institutions valuing public vehicles. Other than that...
But Doc, the STC as the government valuer, it's like any other valuer. Don't they follow principles in valuation? How is it that their valuations tend to be so far apart from any other valuation you will get of a property, of an asset?
You see, the sad truth is that you are not allowed to take it to any other valuer than the STC. That's the challenge.
But what is the STC using?
As the STC makes us believe that they are using standard valuation procedures. And because they are provided for in law, that's why I'm saying that we should liberalize the system, open it up, and allow other institutions to come in. But insofar as the Auditor General...
But you don't subscribe to the call, which has become an annual ritual, so to speak, that at least every 4 years, that we should scrap this kind of policy. In fact, there are certain, presidents who have attempted that policy, that you don't take these vehicles with you after you are done your service.
I think
at least not at the prices that public service officers do.
I will subscribe to that, except that I would say that we should also try not to demotivate public officers. Already, a lot of things are happening in the public sector. So yes, we need some modification in that arrangement, that 4 years, 5 years, duty post vehicle, so that we have some people who are about going on retirement. They will acquire a vehicle 4 years to retirement, and they'll park it in their garage, make sure they don't use it. Within 4 or 5 years, they apply and then it is sold to them. So we need a comprehensive review over that whole regime. But we should do it cautiously so as not to demotivate public officers. Else, if they know that they are not going to get the vehicle, they can have an alternative way of milking the state, and that will come to us at a higher cost.
Interesting. Prof, can we move on? Or you want to make a... do we still have Daniel on the line? Yes. Yes, please, let's hear you on this, then we take a break and come to the bigger picture.
Right. Samson, there are two key issues here. I think first, with the valuation, if someone tells me that there is a public vehicle that was bought in 2020, let's say Toyota Corolla, and that's at 2022. Daniel, we want to sell this to you at a price of 10,000 Ghana cedis. I will not be very happy. I will not quickly raise my hands in the air and then happily jump to issue 10,000 cedis to buy that vehicle. We all know how public vehicles and property are managed in this country. Go to the ministries, go to the various departments and agencies and look at the current state of vehicles that were purchased for these ministries and departments just last year. Go and look at the Stanbic vehicles or minibuses that were bought for GPRTU to use just last year or even this year, and look at the current state. They have been misused. They are in a very deplorable state of wear and tear. And so I think that unless we have information about the state of the vehicles, we should not just look at the type or the model of vehicle and then be angry at the prices that they've been valued. We need to look at the state because, as I said, you go to the ministries, departments, and agencies, go and look at vehicles just bought for them last year, and you feel very sorry. What is more serious about this matter is the fact that you have a referee going to officiate a game between two teams, and the referee is supposed to have knowledge of the rules of how the game is supposed to be played, and then the referee now tells you or finds himself on the field and tells you that I didn't know that these are the rules. Because the Auditor General is raising issue about the fact that the Judicial Secretary or the Judicial Service did not seek approval from the Ministry of Finance. The judiciary, the judges are there to interpret the rules of the game. And so if they bought the vehicles without taking a look at the processes, the procedures, the rules that were supposed to be followed, and then they did not apprise themselves of the fact that the final approval had not been secured and yet went ahead to buy those vehicles, then that is where there is a serious issue with this whole process. Because the referee who is supposed to interpret the rules of the game now saying that, well, the coaches said that we should play the game the way that they like. And so it was not really, it's not our fault for not knowing that the Ministry of Finance final clearance had not been secure and all that. That's one we can force them for it. And then we can all see that there is a serious issue there. So I think that's why the Auditor General did not go so much into the evaluation, but it's raising issues about now the final approval process that was not secure. So I think that the judges maybe should eat a humble pie and maybe concede that, well, if really it is the case that, as the Auditor General said, they did not get final approval before buying it, then they also maybe erred in that particular regard.
Yeah, their point is that, look, they are not interested in all that part of the face. All they know is that they've been notified that this is available. They just make the application. And then there's an assessment. They are asked to make a payment, and they make a payment. And then also there's what they pay is subject to duty, customs duty.
But Samson, is that how they determine cases in their courts?
No. If a case comes to a judge, then they will be seized with all the facts and they have to do their work. But this is not a case coming before a judge.
Of course. And so the judge is the one who bought the vehicle. And so it is a case of a transaction coming before a judge. And so the judge is supposed to know the rules governing the transaction. And they cannot sit there and say, oh, we didn't know that the final approval should have been secure, because the judge is supposed to look at the rules, interpret the rules, come to a conclusive evidence.
Is that a fair demand on them? You are at the university and your HR notifies you that this is a policy that is available and you can benefit. Your vehicle you have used.
About judges who are supposed to.
No, wait. I want us to look at it from the factual point of view and what the procedure is.
Yes.
And you make an application that you want, the vehicles are being auctioned. You make an application that you are interested. Then they go do evaluation and bring you the price. Are you telling me that you go reading laws about whether or not somebody has got the approval, the HR got approval or it didn't get approval?
Well, yes, because maybe some of the vehicles might have been stolen from somewhere and added to what is being auctioned.
No. In this case, the vehicles will be vehicles that you have been using. So there's no question about stealing.
Right. The Auditor General says that approval from the Ministry of Finance was not secured. And that is
Secured
part
by
of the
who?
process.
Was not secured by who?
Was not secured by the Judicial Secretary or the Judicial Service. It's not the judge.
That's the point I'm making here.
Exactly. So you going to buy that particular commodity or vehicle should be interested in that process as well.
Okay.
Otherwise, then what is the use of their job when it comes to interpreting
I
the
get
laws
your
of the
point.
game?
You are saying that the judges should ask the judicial secretary if
Exactly.
they got the approval before.
Exactly.
Okay.
Before
Interesting
buying.
point. Interesting point. Okay, thank you very much. I was asking if Professor Kukwasa wants to say anything before we go on break.
No, I think we've exhausted the matter.
Okay. Okay. So we know that, like I mentioned earlier, we know that. Is it which president is it? I was trying to remember that had already, tried to disallow this process and said that this policy should not be maintained. I remember that of Mills. Then when
Mills.
again? Okay.
Issuing it in green number plates.
Yes. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we'll take a quick break here. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And my attention has been drawn to look at Section 83 of the Public Procurement Act. And it talks about authority to dispose. And it says the head of a procurement entity shall convene a board of survey comprising representatives of departments with unserviceable, obsolete, or surplus stores, plant and equipment, which shall report on the items and, subject to a technical report on them, recommend the best method of disposal after the officer in charge has completed a board of survey form. The board of survey's recommendation shall be approved by the head of the procurement entity, and the item shall be disposed of as approved. Where the items become unserviceable for reasons other than fair wear and tear, such as through accident or expiry, a set of procedure established by the board for handling losses shall be followed before the items are boarded and disposed of. What do you say about this?
Samson, I think, let me explain that the PFM Act is superior to all other laws apart from the Constitution. In fact, Section 2, subsection 3 of the PFM Act is clear that where there is a conflict or inconsistency between the provisions of this Act and any other enactment, the provisions of this Act shall prevail. So what it means is that when you look at the PFM Regulation 158 on procurement, which the Auditor General cited, these things would have to be done, and then it will be added to the request to the Minister for Finance for his approval. So for instance, Regulation 158, Sub-Regulation 4 of the PFM regulation is clear that the Minister shall not approve the disposal of any vehicle of a covered entity unless the B is saying the method of disposal is in accordance with Public Procurement Act.
Okay.
So the application and request for his approval should have had this Board of Survey report already complied with.
Okay.
And we should be clear that the public financial management is second to the Constitution as far as public sector financial management is concerned.
Right. And what I was trying to remember, apart from Professor Mills' time, when there appears to have been a temporary sort of, hold on these, the President Akufo-Addo in 2017, I think that was in April 2017, said, quote, "These are difficult times." He had actually suspended the process and, asked that the policy should be stopped. The government policy used to be that public officials could buy state vehicles that were over 2 years old when the officials were leaving office. However, it often became a politically charged issue whenever power change hands. The exiting administration is often accused of selling state vehicles cheaply to exiting government officials. The arrangement had become a byword for corruption in the country, to the extent that in April 2017, President Akufo-Addo banned such transactions. But can he ban it with his mouth?
Well,
or that he will simply ask the minister not to approve?
He will just ask the minister not to approve or advise the Public Services Commission to make sure that this doesn't happen, because it is part of the conditions of service. So it's just a matter of reviewing the conditions of service of public officers.
So he said, these are difficult times for the Ghanaian people. The policy that has worked so far, which is running into a lot of problems because of the way it had been abused, which is that officials can buy official cars. That policy will no longer work. No official is going to have the opportunity to buy his official car. So we put an end to it. The president told journalists after a minister's retreat at the Peduasi Lodge in the Eastern region. So what has happened? Maybe this has been reviewed and we don't know about it. Interesting. Now, let's go to the bigger picture and also ask the questions. Is the auditor simply just reporting these, misused, stolen, etc. funds to us, or he is recovering them? Now, I'll go straight to Professor Kukwasari again. So, Prof, let's get to the elephant in the room, so to speak. This is 17 billion of irregularities, quote unquote, and some would like to use the word stealing money from the state.
Yeah, Samson, one of the problems we have is that the Auditor General actually does not use a very easy to understand term. So what is irregularity? I mean, most people don't even understand it. And the problem that arises when most people don't understand it is that it gives whoever is doing the wrong, the tortfeasor, the person who is committing the wrong, it gives him a wiggle room to say, oh, well, I did it, but it did not actually result in any loss. But believe me or not, what we are talking about here is 17 billion cedis that has gone into private pockets. I put a formula the other time on my Facebook, which basically goes like irregularities minus surcharges equals private pockets. And it appears that for whatever reasons, the Auditor General, the current Auditor General, doesn't like surcharges. So surcharges have been set to 0. And if surcharges are set to 0, then the irregularities are going into private pockets. Look, Samson, the Auditor General, and let me back up 1 minute. This 17 billion, let's remember, is just the audit of the public boards, statutory institutions, and so on. There's another audit of the MBAs. The irregularities there, I believe, comes to about $1 billion. So there are going to be multiple audits of different public entities, and each of them will have its own irregularities. Now, when you read the report, one of the problems that we have is that it's a comprehensive audit. So the Auditor General is doing what we call a financial statement audit. He's also doing a compliance audit. He's even doing an operational audit. And all of these things have their own outputs and outcomes. So if you are doing a financial statement audit, the emphasis typically is on whether there are errors in the reported amount or whether there are some fraudulent reporting in the financial statement. If you are doing a compliance audit, then what you are doing is to ascertain whether things done comply with some regulation or some law. And I believe the irregularities that the Auditor General used here conform to this latter definition or this latter activity, the compliance audit. So when you see irregularity, it is also the same as illegality. In other words, people have done something that is not allowed by the law. And financial irregularities basically is telling you or giving you a summary of the financial consequences of those illegalities. All right? So if you talk about debt management, for instance, the process by which public boards and so on give out loans or they sell to customers and they are supposed to collect the receivables. And you see that there's a big amount that, oh, well, we don't manage that well, so we don't recover. But the reason that is an illegality can be found in the Public Financial Management Act, I believe Section 68, or maybe Section 91. I don't have it in front of me. But that section imposes an affirmative responsibility on those who oversee these public boards to ensure that they are collecting monies that are due them. And if they don't, then they violate that section. Secondly, and one of the things that would not happen, I think if you look at Section 91.2, maybe read Section 91.2 if you have the time. Section 91.2 provides that public boards, public is the board of the public institutions that negligently or willfully do not collect these monies due them should lose their emolument. I've seen this problem for so many years, but I've never seen one board member lose his emolument. And now, when you talk about debt irregularities, they give you a big amount. And then you try to find out, well, why? Look at some of the reasons why they don't recover those receivables. There is no effective debt collection policy. There is no effective credit controls to recover their debts. Management is indifferent, or management maintains an indifferent posture towards loan recovery. There is improper maintenance of records on debtors. There's an absence of debtors' aging analysis, and so on and so forth. So what you see there is that this is not just negligently failing to collect your debt. This is actually willfully failing to collect your debt. That occasions loss to the state. So not only are you violating the Public Financial Management Act, and I told you to read the offenses, because every violation is an offense carrying its own penalty, and the Minister of Finance is supposed to surcharge them. I think that's 97. But it's also going into criminality, because you are willfully causing financial loss to the state. And that character, what I've just described, the negligence, the willfulness, permeates all facets of the irregularities that are summarized under different headings. So now, when I read these things, I say to myself, well, look, déjà vu. These irregularities occur so regularly that it makes no sense for us to be calling them irregularities anymore. These are regular occurrences. For me, it's almost like post-revenue collection losses, just like we have in post-harvest losses. And when you put it together, you come to an inescapable conclusion that somehow the public sector has become a cesspool. 17 billion cedis in irregularities. Moreover, public financial management has become a vessel for transferring public funds into private pockets. It also reflects the Auditor General's failure to utilize his disallowance and surcharge power under Article 187 in contempt of the Occupy Ghana case. Because if you go to read the Occupy Ghana case, it says, even though the Constitution says the Auditor General may surcharge and disallow, the may here actually is mandatory. You shall. That is one of the learning from the Occupy General case. As a result of this, audits normally have a deterrence value. They deter people because you know the auditors are coming and you don't want to do certain things because you know they're going to find out. And if they find out, there's going to be consequences. But in our case, because there are no consequences, the audits have no deterrence value. When the auditors come, people just laugh and say, write what you want to write.
Prof, what will you suggest should happen? Because the Supreme Court did not only hold, as you just said, that it is mandatory, but made consequential orders. And in those orders, it said, 1, as a sequel to our judgment just delivered, we further direct that henceforth, the Auditor General shall take steps to recover the amount unlawfully expended from the person or persons who incurred or authorized the disallowed expenditure. 2, the Auditor General shall also take steps to recover the amount from the person or persons by whom the amount ought to have been brought into account. 3, the Auditor General shall also take steps to recover the value of the loss or deficiency. And that for me is instructive. You are either recovering the loss or deficiency from the person or persons by whose negligence or misconduct the losses or deficiencies were incurred, whether or not the person is a public servant. And finally, the Attorney General is ordered to take all necessary steps to enforce the decisions or steps taken by the Auditor General, supra, to ensure compliance, including, in some cases, criminal prosecution, end quote.
Absolutely. So it is very, very clear that the Auditor General can't just write to us that somebody took 5 million cedis that he was not supposed to take. He actually has an affirmative responsibility to do what he can to retrieve that and communicate with the Attorney General so that the Attorney General is also instituting criminal prosecutions. And when this is not being done, then the Attorney General in normal circumstances will bring contempt proceedings at the Supreme Court or at the proper forum, saying that the Auditor General is not doing his job under Article 187.7 and under the Occupy Ghana case. But here, the Attorney General is slow to do it, and so it falls back on Occupy Ghana. So Occupy Ghana, you've got your judgment, now go and enforce it. But that is putting too much responsibility on private individuals who have very finite resources. Once they procure the judgment, then the Attorney General's department, there is a Solicitor General who is paid to do these things. There is a Director of Public Prosecutions who has a team of prosecutors who should be going around to do these things. And if they are not doing it, and the Auditor General is not doing it, then I guarantee you that next year we'll be here talking about the same thing. And so I write here that the Auditor General's report has become an annual ritual, which reminds us that there's no accountability in the public space. Financial indiscipline abounds. Our financial management laws are observed in the breach. There is lack of ethical leadership, and the citizens are not doing enough to realize the promises of the Constitution, at least with respect to financial governance.
Right.
So something,
yes,
we have a problem. And citizens have to resolve that, look, this is not going to go. We've managed to convince even some of the citizens that there's nothing wrong with a public official buying a car that has a value of 100,000 for 5,000. I mean, very respected people in the society have been convinced that that is okay because it's done. We need to reset our minds and start being serious about protecting public resources because we just don't have enough and because the consequences of these leakages are debilitating. People dying because there's no oxygen, roads that are bad. I mean, so many public goods that we need, and we allow public funds to go into private pockets.
Right. So, Prof, my final question to you is, so I have in front of me several letters written by Occupy Ghana to the Auditor General, and they have gone beyond the office of the Auditor General, gone to the Attorney General's, office as well, issued various demands, various threats, among others, because they have been pushed. The Auditor General, in one of its reply to Occupy Ghana in July of this year, told Occupy Ghana that it said that the Auditor General was guided to develop a procedure of first issuing the notice of intention to surcharge before issuing the surcharge certificates because of the decision of the High Court in the case of Kroll Associates versus Auditor General, Sylvester Mensah versus Auditor General, Alex Nete versus Auditor General, then he mentions others. These appeals were successful because the appellants were not given a hearing during the audit. This is to avoid such situations. It is worthy of note that the evidence required for auditing is different from evidence required by the courts. Then the Auditor General returns again to tell Occupy Ghana that this is what it says, that the Auditor General has set up, this one, it was on the 14th of June. The Auditor General has set up a disallowance and surcharge committee which is working on the 2018 to 2020 reports. The committee is collecting evidence from the various audit teams before proceeding with the notice of intention to disallow and or surcharge and follow it up with disallowance and surcharge certificates where appropriate. The committee has already concluded work on one special audit which spans from the period 2014 to 2019. The disallowance and surcharge certificates has already been issued. The statutory 60 days for appeal have passed, and the necessary documents have since been transmitted to the Attorney General's office for further action. Now, Prof, you take a pause there and listen to the Attorney General too, when they also wrote to Occupy Ghana. So Occupy Ghana had just been writing. They've just been harassing everybody who must take some step. On the 19th of July, the Attorney General writes to reply to Occupy Ghana and literally admits that the Auditor General has been tardy in the manner in which it is going about what it's supposed to do. Then it suggests steps that it was going to take. So the Attorney General said, I take due cognizance of significant tardiness in the processes to enforce notices of disallowance and surcharge issued by the Auditor General since 2016. So the Melevo surcharges, some of them are still sitting there. In order to realize the true import and effect of Article 1877B, let's ignore all of that, of the Constitution, there ought to be enhanced cooperation between the Auditor General and the Attorney General and Minister for Justice. To achieve this, I have set up a special team specially assigned for the purpose of coordinating with the Auditor General and following up on all relevant information requested from the Auditor General since 2017. Action will be promptly taken to recover all losses the state has suffered as a result of the failure to receive the information. What do you say briefly?
Well, one of the things that fascinates me is there's never tardiness in auctioning state vehicles at reduced price. That is done with alacrity. But when we have to collect state monies that other people have taken, then there's tardiness. Why there is symmetry in tardiness is of concern to me. Look, they say they are doing something, and we have to accept what they are doing, but they have to accelerate it. And going forward, the evidence search for the surcharge must be done contemporaneously with the evidence search for the audit report. You cannot write the audit report and say X has stolen $500,000, and then now I have to go and look for evidence to surcharge, and that is doing it the wrong way. So the Auditor General has to reorient its technology so that when it identifies an irregularity, which means something done contrary to the law that has financial consequences, it also simultaneously collects the evidence to allow him to do the surcharge. Otherwise, we'll be in 2025, and then we are trying to collect funds due in 2016.
Thank you.
One of the things that your readers should know is that the longer it takes to collect something, then the higher the probability that you are never going to get it.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Kweku-Asare. And you must know that, this is one of his areas of comfort as far as accounting is concerned. So let me quickly hear from Dr. Daniel Appiah, Department of Public Administration of the University of Ghana Business School. Yes, the focus now is how do we just get these monies back? I think that's all Ghanaians are interested in. And Occupy Ghana did the calculation from 2016 to 2020. That gives us in excess of or about 48 billion. And we don't have record of taking the monies back, apart from Domelevo, who issued the surcharges and got some 67 million back to chest. Some are saying, this Auditor General, why doesn't he just go ahead and issue these things and let the people who are aggrieved go to court and fight? Because you win some, you lose some anyway.
Right, Samson, reading the Auditor General's report and then the back and forth communication between Occupy Ghana, the Auditor General, and then the Attorney General makes one feel very sad, and one doesn't even know which way to go. Now, the question that you raised first is the Auditor General simply just reporting or recovering misappropriated funds? We had Domelevo, who was in office, and then he recovered for us some monies that had been misappropriated by certain people, over 67 million or whatever cities. And then we all are aware of the circumstances surrounding his departure from office. Then we got the new Auditor General, who came in first in an acting capacity. And now for us to understand why the current Auditor General has issued only one surcharge certificate compared to Domelevo's 112, we need to also take note of how he was appraised during the time that he was in an acting capacity. When he was in an acting capacity, and then the time that Domelevo was kicked out or his tenure was not renewed, and then the Ghana National Anti-Corruption Coalition went to the Jubilee House to go and then have some conversation with the president, maybe to reconsider Domelevo's tenure. This is what the president said, that the acting Auditor General, since his appointment, has demonstrated sufficient quality and independence of view. And this is August 18, 2021. Then the president went ahead. He says, for instance, the acting Auditor General, he is responsible for some things that are unheard of. in our history, the 12 statutory reports that have to be compiled and placed before Parliament in the year of Parliament, this is the first time that it has been done. Even the most touted Auditor General before him, referring to the Melevo, never managed to do it, but this one has done it. And so he was being praised not for recovering money, he was being praised by the president not for issuing surcharge, he was being praised for issuing reports. And it is continuation of the things that he was being praised by the one who appointed him in office. You know, there are political realities. When the Melevo left office, because of his stature, he could get a job now with the World Bank. And so if you have been appointed in an acting capacity into some office, and the one who put you there is praising you not for recovering misappropriated money, but then for issuing more reports, then I think that you will want to continue on that path to also secure your work. So at the end of the day, we have to look at the history. And I agree with Professor Kwekwasari that citizens and CSOs, we have to stand up. When the Melevo was being kicked out or his tenure was not extended, nobody went to pick it at the Jubilee House. All the work that Occupy Ghana did, from now the rules of court committee, the rules that Occupy Ghana made, and then getting the Melevo and then the audit service now to move ahead to issue surcharges. At the time that the Melevo found himself in trouble, we didn't go to pick it at Jubilee House. We didn't rise up to his event. We spoke a lot in the media. And now that we are getting reports,
it's good you said we spoke a lot in the media, but there was more than media advocacy. The CSOs were how many that came together?
300
so there were at my last count because I was part of it, there were over 80 or so CSOs that came together to support the Melevo. They actually wrote, the presidency responded. Yeah. Eventually, they took up a suit.
Yeah.
There are some of them who still believe that even if the Melevos, had reached a retirement age, for a government that is known to give people retirement extension, he should have been giving an extension because he was recovering money. So as for public support for Mr. Domelevo, he himself, 2 days ago, said that he had phenomenal public CSO support, including individual support.
Something I agree, but I'm saying that in political circles, there are certain strategies that tend to be more effective in the context of developing countries.
Okay.
If lecturers are not being paid, we don't sit there and just writing letters. If public servants are not being paid what is due them, they just don't sit there writing letters at the end of the day. If push comes to shove, you see them on the street demonstrating. And that is why on Monday, we are all going to picket in front of the Auditor General's office.
So Doc, thank you very much. See you Monday morning. Yes. So, Dr. Kujasanti, since the Citizen Coalition was launched, you have also been trying, because Occupy Ghana is part of the coalition. You have been working, trying to get to the Auditor General, want to sit down with him. I don't know if you're also tired writing the letters. That's why now you are hitting the streets.
Thank you very much, Samson. I mean, I am a very strong advocate for a Supreme Audit Agency. And if you look across the world, the design of the accountability system, that's why you give the Auditor General independence. Because most of these recommendations you see, if you tell the offender, go and retrieve money from yourself, most likely nothing will happen. Who is going to hold that offender responsible if they don't? And a lot of these entities, whether it's Ministry of Defense or whatever, who really has power within the state to hold that person accountable? And that is why the Constitution in its wisdom, and it's good audit practice everywhere, that you surcharge, let the person go to court and contest it. Because it is against you, you are responsible. The next time, when you have to make a decision that is, you have to exercise discretion, you are going to follow the rules. So you take away the deterrent effect when you basically outsource.
He's saying that some people have won cases against the Auditor General So he is taking a cue from that.
But that's what the court is for. Yes, you can take, to sort of make your processes a lot more, to avoid maybe judgments like that. But Domlevo won some cases, he lost some cases. That's fine, right? So you can take lessons, but it doesn't mean that your entire strategy should be based on what the High Court said about any particular issue. So for me, and if you look at it, 14th June when he was writing on to Occupy Ghana, he was talking about setting up a committee. And we are talking about 2019.
14 June 2020.
2022. We are talking about 2019, 2020 audit reports, and we just got 2021. So for all those times, what were we doing? And as you say, by that time, even if you go back, then maybe the evidence is even not there anymore.
That's the point where the two of you were nodding in agreement to Professor Kukwasa.
Exactly. It's the process, the system for me, the PFM Act, all the powers of the Auditor General. If we were even implementing 50%, it will create a certain deterrent effect within the system, sanitize the system. At the moment, both the Auditor General and all of the institutions, even the Finance Ministry, have basically ceded all their powers.
Okay.
And this thing is going on. So anyway, as we say, Monday, we are going to picket. For us, it's just a starting point.
Who is invited?
Everybody is invited. We are trying to negotiate with the police to meet behind the Holy Spirit Cathedral office where O'Reilly used to be. That's where we'll gather, and we'll head, out to the ministries, right? And we want Ghanaians because you see, it's our taxpayers' money.
For those of you who may not have the opportunity to be physically present at the Auditor General's offices, you are simply supposed to wear red.
Yes.
Take a photograph.
Yeah, it's Red Monday.
In red. It's a Red Monday, and put it on your social media.
Samson, I really wish this picketing never happened.
Really?
Really, I really wish it never happened.
Part of the blame is being put at your doorstep.
Yes, and
you are the internal,
audit agency.
Audit agency. So you should pluck all of this before it even gets to the.
Yes, we do. We are doing our best. And Samson, people must understand that the Auditor General performed financial and performance audit. The 17 billion we're talking about is only on the audit of public corporations.
Yes, actually.
The Auditor General also submitted an audit on the Ministry, Department, and agencies.
That's right.
The use of District Assembly's Common Fund, that of MMDAs, pre-tertiary educational institutions, technical universities, and then the public boards and corporations. What I think the Auditor General did not do is to give an update on the progress made towards implementing the previous recommendations, because we have made some recoveries. And you see, when you are making such recoveries and you are making modest gains, people must know. On his report on the management and utilization of common fund, for instance, the irregularities has reduced by 14%. That of public boards has increased by 36%, I can imagine. But that 17 billion, Samson, people must also know that the composition, it is recoverable debt, 10 billion, and then 6 billion is as a result of electricity supply to consumers by NEDCO and VRE, which are supposed to be recovered. So if these institutions were recovering, there was no need for us to go to IMF. MDA's irregularities reduced by 47.3%. And even with that, GRA is culpable. GRA was supposed to have collected some monies from oil marketing companies, which is accounted to about 91.5% of their irregularities. When you come to pre-university education, it has also reduced by 55.8%. And even with that one, GET Fund did not send some monies they are supposed to send for project to be completed. For that matter, Auditor General flagged it. When it comes to the technical university, that is a serious matter. It has increased by 166%. And there too, they have an excuse. Why? Kofodia Technical University is saying that GET Fund was supposed to send some money for them to complete a project. The money did not go, for which reason the project cost will have to go high by another 20 million. Come to the MMDAs. It has reduced by it has increased by 0.47%. And you know what constituted that? Completed projects not in use and the uncompleted projects. So I think that the Auditor General going forward would have to give us progress towards implementing this recommendation. At the IAA, as at 31st July 2022, we have been able to follow through to implement 2,766 audit recommendations. And we have saved the country 665 million cedis. These are the things we want the Auditor General to include in the report so people will know that all is not lost.
Sure, and
Right.
and we have to track that progress.
That's right.
I think for us going forward, that's the progress we have to
Great.
track.
Thank you so very much. And forgive us, we couldn't read the messages you sent. A lot of them. And Kofi Bento says, let's call a spade a spade. These are the leaders of our state looting our state property, bought with poor people's taxes. Yes, they have made laws to legalize it, but it's still plunder, and it's wrong. If we don't fix these things soon, we endanger this democracy. Let us not wait for someone to ride on popular anger and upset things, and then line up people, and I can't read the rest of them. Kofi, we don't want to get there. Whatever the situation, we never want to get there. And my guests on this show this morning have been Professor Stephen Kweku Asare, Fellow CDD Ghana and DND Fellow for Public Law and Justice. Dr. Eric Odrosine is Director General, Internal Audit Agency, that's the IAA. Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante is Director, Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the CDD. And he, together with Dr. Daniel Appiah, who is Lecturer, Department of Public Administration, University of Ghana, Business School and Political Governance Expert, will be picketing at the Auditor General's office on Monday. If you can't, they say simply wear red, take a picture, and post it on social media. We also spoke to Professor Godwin Awendare, Pro Vice Chancellor, University of Ghana, in charge of academic and student affairs. Dr. Norris Bequin, University Relations Officer, KNUST. Dr. Ahmed Jinapo, Deputy Director General, the GTEC. Justice Kofi was supposed to join us. He's President, Judges and Magistrates Association, but unfortunately, we couldn't establish contact with him whilst the show was ongoing. I'm Samson Ladia Yanini. Have a good afternoon.